from a timeline point of view. So let's say I have 70K right now and I want to start putting on a business.
We're talking 3 to 6 months, the whole process to get the E2 visa.
Is the assumption there that you're going to set up a business in the US?
There's different ways to move to the United States, but it's easier if it's a franchise. Franchises are federally regulated in the United States.
Is there like, oh, I have to have created 10 jobs, or it doesn't matter? It's just, oh, where did you hire a couple of Americans?
There's no minimum, and it can be a mix of.
Welcome to Unfiltered with Porch People, where I explore the world of the immigrant entrepreneur. Today, I'm chatting with Patrick Findaro, who runs Visa Franchise. It's a business in the US that helps immigrant entrepreneurs who are looking to get into the US buy a franchise business and then get the E2 visa. I have never heard about the E2 visa before. And so the two questions I have is, or rather, maybe I should start off with, what even led you to start doing a business where you're doing visa franchises and stuff? Because it sounds boring and exciting at the same time. And I'm hoping that by the end of this conversation, I'll be like, oh, it's a pretty exciting thing to do.
No, thanks, Dozy. So I was already working with investors for like the last 15 years. And first at JP Morgan, then after a while, I worked at a small fund and we had investors that were coming from all over the world and they were investing $500,000. And we would effectively lend that money out to franchisees, and the partners went on to lend it out to hotel operators. And the investment was $500K, and you could get a US green card through the EB-5 visa program, which is now $800K. And we discovered the E2 visa through prospective clients that they wanted to invest a lot less, like $80K, $100K in a US business. They wanted to operate it day to day. They wanted to be active investors, not passive investors in some fund. And there's about 80 countries across the world that have a E2 treaty with the United States, including all of Western Europe, Mexico, Canada, much of Latin America, like Argentina. Notable countries that don't have it, like your home country, Nigeria, unfortunately doesn't have it. Vietnam, Brazil, China, Russia, India, South Africa. So there's obviously options too. I mentioned that we've had a lot of Nigerian clients. Some have other passports, like a UK or Canadian passport, and then others helping them with other, non-immigrant visas like the O1, top talent, or even immigrant categories like the EB1A. But that was effectively how we started, helping people invest 100K more or less in a franchise. And most nationalities that have the E2 treaty are able to get a 5-year visa to the US. And usually within that period, they're able to secure permanent residency, i.e., a green card for them and their family.
That's interesting. And just kind of building on that is, I know you say 80K, 100K, but doesn't that, how does one determine, say, what do I need to invest depending on the business type? Because I can imagine there are different business types and they all have different needs, or is that like the 80K, like your entry ticket? Once you do anything above that, then you probably are going to get the visa, or it depends
That's a
on the
good
business.
question. The lowest I've heard about is 15,000, and it was for like an IT consulting business. If it's under, in our experience, it depends on nationality. But you're sitting up in Canada, under 70K, 80,000 US dollars that's been invested. If you're applying in Toronto, they're going to look at it tightly, especially if it's under 50K. You got to be a pretty damn, airtight business. Hopefully it's already bringing in revenue. You already have clients, you're already making money. So it depends on the type of business. Like if you're opening up a restaurant, it's probably going to be more like 300K plus. And a service-based business, could be closer to 80K, 100,000. So it's going to depend on the type of business. But once you start getting, 50K, 60K, 70K, those applications are generally adjudicated with a little more scrutiny compared to, that 100K or.
Yeah. I can imagine. And now which makes sense, but which makes sense to the regulator, but to the business, you're like, nah, why should I? It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. We started Visa franchise, 20K myself, 20K my brother, and it's grown, a million plus business. So, you don't need much capital to get a business started, especially if it's a service-based business. But they're looking for you to maybe front load some of the expenses. Like if you're going to lease a
Oh,
vehicle, maybe you buy the vehicle, maybe you buy more equipment, maybe you prepay Google ads, Facebook ads, and you start showing, your trips to the US, all
mm,
the conferences that you've attended. So there's some pretty straightforward ways to really document and show that you're getting to the 70, 80K mark.
hmm. And if you think about it from a timeline point of view, so let's say I have 70K right now and I want to start putting on a business. From when you start doing that to when do you get to visa approval? Like what's the if you put in all the bureaucracy that comes in with this kind of things?
Yeah, no, good question. So, say you come to us and we start working together, we incorporate the business, get a tax ID, business bank account. We bring in a member from our team that used to work at the U.S. consulate. And he was a staffer on E2 visas exclusively for 2+ years, was at the consulate for 13 years. So we'll bring him in, as well as we have an in-house attorney and then a filing attorney. And it's strategizing on, hey, what are you going to spend money on? What's your business? Um, how are we going to prove that you lawfully source those funds? So the first is like, how are you going to spend the money, and how we're going to show you spend the money. And then, in parallel, let's build out what your business plan is. If it's already an existing business that does 30K of revenue in the US, already serving American customers, it's going to be a lot easier than if it hasn't had any revenue and we have to really build out the forecast together with the client. And every consulate's a little different in terms of page counts that they accept. So a business plan might be 15 pages, it might be 45 pages, depending on what U.S. consulate or embassy abroad you're applying from. But generally, that process might take 2 months to invest, us document the investment, put the petition together, do the business plan. Could take more time though. If you're not able to spend the money and commit the funds, it could be 6+ months. But in our experience, 2 months, 3 months tops, you should be ready to apply for the E2 visa. And every consulate unfortunately has a different policy, but generally you submit the application electronically, or your attorney will submit it electronically, and then you go on for biometrics to get your fingerprinting, and then you have an interview scheduled, and they usually tell you on the spot if you're approved or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll ask for more information, and yeah, we're talking 3 to 6 months, the whole process to get the E2 visa.
Yeah. So something I was just gonna clarify. So it's basically I heard you say incorporate a business. So do you is the assumption there that you're going to set up a business in the US or to buy the franchise, or is it that your dossier as an investor buys into an existing business in the states and then you start the process of
It's
oh
flexible, and
okay
my book that I wrote, as I mentioned, Own Your American Dream. I go through 8 different paths you can move to the U.S. So starting a business, bringing your business from abroad, buying an existing business, buying a
oh
franchise, investing in real estate, being an active real estate investor. So there's different ways to move. We specialize in helping people buy a franchise as the means to move to the United States, especially if you've never owned a business before. If you were employed, you're moving down from Canada, it can make a lot of sense to go the franchise path the first time. But I have Canadian clients that are already selling. 50% of their revenue is coming from Americans, so it just makes sense to incorporate in the United States and start having the revenue flow to that entity instead of the Canadian entity, and show some expenses to justify the investment.
so like for the Canadian business right now so let's say they already have a business who's selling to the US, they register a business in the US, revenue starts to flow. Do they start the visa process after they've started showing revenue, or can
Oh yeah,
those
so
things
great
run parallel?
question. In the U.S., it functions a little different than Canada, where there's like, what I understand, like a two-step process. In the U.S., like, you go in with the business plan. Ideally, the business is already operating or it's near operational, because your chances of getting approved are much higher. And they give you a 5-year visa, so you can come and go for 5 years. And then after
Oh,
5 years, they check it again. So you want to do as much as possible before going in that to the consulate interview, where ideally the business is open or about to open, and maybe you already hired an American for the U.S.
yeah.
business.
And then if after 5 years, what happens after 5 years? Does that depend? Do you get kicked out, or do you stay depending on how
I'd
well the
say
business is doing?
denials for 5 years, like if you're not making any money and you don't have any Americans, maybe or maybe you just have one American employed or one contractor, that's not very strong. But if you have 10 Americans and maybe you've had some bad years financially, you're probably still going to be able to renew it. That's what they call the marginality test. So you have to show that it's making an impact above and beyond your immediate family. So that could be from
Mm,
job creation. It could be you're making a good amount of money beyond just to pay yourself some
yeah,
relatively small salary. So it's kind of either or. You have 10, 15 employees and you're not making much money, or you're making 100 to 300K plus, but you just have three Americans hired. The likelihood of being approved, I think both those cases are pretty high. Where you hear about the denials, and even like the New York Times has run stories on people that were denied the renewal. They didn't have any Americans or one American, and the business was kind of failing, and the government didn't extend the visa, which I think that makes sense.
yeah. Media is interesting how they tell stories, but
Yeah, you start digging in the case, it's like, well, the guy's
yeah,
hotel's failing, and it's just like him and his wife working at like a small bed and breakfast. And yeah, it's sad.
yeah,
They've been here 10 years, but like it was an investor visa, and it's a business, and the business isn't working, and they can't fulfill their obligation.
yeah.
So,
So I want to get a bit tactical here, and which is so in Canada we're doing this thing where there's a ton of stuff where, like for our express entry, for example, I'll use that example. Things are category based. Oh, we're focused on STEM and healthcare and certain things. For the E2 visas, they're like businesses that like if you apply for those businesses to either to buy or to incorporate, you're sure you're gonna get approval, or are they like is it
we
doesn't matter?
guarantee results under certain circumstances. Like if you've invested 100K or more, you have at least $1,000 of revenue, you've hired an American, a couple other things like not having a criminal record. And we'll do that if it's an independent business, but it's easier if it's a franchise because it's a little more cut and dry. Franchises are federally
Yeah,
regulated in the United States, and you have to show in the item 19 of the franchise disclosure document how much money you need to spend on every single line item. So it's a little easier going to the consulate interview and saying, "Yeah, I've spent 30K in the franchise fee, 20K in my vehicle. It's a painting franchise. I bought 3K of painting equipment. I have some working capital. I paid Visa franchise to help me get the visa and do all the business incorporation and support for the business." So the franchise is a little more straightforward, and it's kind of more cut and dry, you could say.
yeah, yeah. 'Cause I can imagine because it's just hey, this is the plan here, plug and play, put change the
Exactly.
figures depending on how much you're bringing in, the size of the business and stuff. Interesting. And kind of going back to that point we made about the jobs you have to have people have high in American. Is there like a fixed number? Like, is there like oh, let's say I'm buying a franchise, and after 5 years, because I mean, job creation is a big thing, yes, but is there like, oh, I have to have done created 10 jobs, 15 jobs, or it doesn't matter? It's just, oh, do you hire a couple of Americans and all that kind of stuff?
There's no minimum, and it can be a mix of W two. Well, that's like the tax form for employees, or 1099. That's the tax form for independent contractors. But yeah, generally, if it's employees, like 3 to 5 plus, and if it's independent contractors, probably more. And then hopefully you have like a couple of employees. But it's really going to depend on the type of business. But the U.S. isn't looking to give E2 visas to some IT consultant that has like one independent contractor that makes like 20K a year, and it's kind of just freelance work. They're looking for people that are going to grow, a serious business and scale it up. But yeah, for the E2 visa, there's no minimum job number.
Yeah, I think that point you make about it's really about because I mean it's so easy to start thinking about it in terms of oh I'm a consultant or freelancer or something, and I get the visa, and then I have a couple of contractors who basically do work for me based off clients I get, which is very different from saying I'm trying to build a business because that business is going to come sit in the US and literally do work, hire people. I think that's a very, because I glossed over it initially just in my head, but when you just say that now, I'm like, that's so true. Like, it's an investor visa, entrepreneurship, like, come and do business, not come and do consulting. That's what I think.
Yeah,
Because
I
these
mean,
days,
if you're nervous about like hiring Americans and if it's going to be profitable, like we helped a client that moved down from Canada open up a residential cleaning business. He invested 70K and then I think another 30 or 40K in working capital. And he started with a crew of four maids with one vehicle. And then he's bought another vehicle, hiring another four maids. And you just hire as the business scales up. And then there's even some models like a barber shop where you're splitting, the house might keep 40%, the barber keeps 60, or some dog grooming business models where there's a split of revenue between the groomer and the franchise,
yeah,
as well as in-home healthcare. So like providing caregiving services for seniors.
yeah,
That's a business that you could have 50 plus employees, but you're only you. It's good if you have employees because if they get just using numbers, say you're paying them $20 an hour and you charge the client $32 an hour, you're only hiring people if you're getting paid.
yeah.
So it's nice. It's a good, if you're hiring people, that means there's revenue coming
There's
in and
revenue. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
part of the gross profit.
yeah. So, like, can you use borrowed money to fund your ET investment? Does it matter, or like it doesn't matter?
Can you use what money? Sorry.
Borrowed money, like money you borrowed from like
Borrow.
a
Yeah, for
bank.
sure. So you can borrow from family members. You could be gifted money from family members. You could borrow money from a bank. As long as we can document it, that's fine.
Mm.
A rich
And then
uncle can lend you some money.
I'm thinking about it like, okay, is there someone I can borrow money from? But yeah, I'm not ready to move to the US yet, though. But what happens if the business fails
If the business fails, it does
within the
fall
first
on you.
5 years? Yeah.
Yeah, it does fall on you to report it to the consulate and basically then apply for another visa or go back home. In
Ah,
practice, what a lot of our clients do is set up a holding company, and in the business plan, we basically have a set anchor business. It could be an anchor franchise, and then there's other business activities that the investor is going to be doing. And if you fulfill those business activities, your attorney might say, okay, yeah, you're fine. This initial business, LLC A up high, LLC B down here, LLC B, failed, but you've also continued activities and you're employing Americans and you're doing business as per the business plan you showed. So yeah, a lot of our clients like that structure because it gives them flexibility should the original business fail, or maybe you have a massive success and you sell the business. We've had clients that have lost the visa if they didn't have the structure because a big competitor came in and acquired their business that was tied to their visa. Um,
interesting.
and so it can go both ways. It's not always
Which
like a bad
I
thing.
didn't see that coming. Wait. So, and because I feel like the way you're describing how you run the visa franchise thing, it feels like you almost do like it's almost like a full wide glove service end to end, where basically help you get the visa, advise you on getting the business plan done and getting settled in and moving forward. And you raise an interesting point about growth, and all that stuff. And so I'm just wondering, like, how do you help people when they start thinking of like someone wants to scale the business, and how do you kind of balance that with E2 compliance? Like, with all these things you're talking about, maybe you have LLCA, LLCB, you're scaling LLCB. Like, how do you now manage all that? LLCB gets bigger than LLCA. What happens with your visa? What happens with your business plan? Does anything change? Does it matter? Or it's just,
So Visa franchise, we definitely do provide like an A to Z solution for starting the business, then obtaining the visa, and we bring in the professionals as needed. So like the immigration attorney that's doing the filing, accountant for pre-immigration tax planning, and a lot of the rest we're handling in house. But in terms of like ongoing compliance, that's something that we're currently not offering, but we might have in the works. But you need to surround yourself with the right professionals, and we'll connect you. You'll have that ongoing attorney relationship. You have us to lean on, but it's not something that we're currently offering like an ongoing
Yeah.
solution as these guys scale up the business.
Yeah. If you don't mind, and I just want to know, like, and if you can tell me that there's no answer to this, but it's like, what are the things, so for an entrepreneur who's coming in, and yes, you all don't provide that service, but if you were to say to them, hey, watch out for A, B, C, D in terms of compliance, and find someone to make sure that they advise you as you grow your business, what would those things be? One, two, three of them, or even if it's just one thing?
In terms of compliance, I think what I hear from entrepreneurs and interviewing a Brazilian client from my book that opened up an ice cream franchise, it's kind of a pain in the ass in the beginning to open up a business, especially if it has like a physical footprint. You're welcoming clients. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of permits to get. But once you get it, you're in. Where in a lot of countries, there's like a lot more things that can go, checks on the businesses, and you don't have that as much in the U.S. Where a lot of the hardest part is like opening right, getting the business open and getting that process done when it's a physical business. But in terms of online businesses, you're providing services, get insurance like professional liability insurance and different insurance. So and then ensure you have good tight contracts in place. And if you invest in a franchise brand, like I interviewed a client from Bolivia that opened up applied behavioral therapy centers for children on the spectrum of autism. And the franchisor does all the regulation, helps with the navigating the regulation, the documentation, dealing with insurance. So if it feels overwhelming and the first time you're doing business, maybe the first time you're living in the US, the franchisor can provide a lot of help in terms of like the ongoing compliance and the legal issues.
Yeah. I think that's the advantage of being the franchise, because then you just almost like just get like, you have a support system that just says, hey, don't go this way, go this way.
Yeah, you're the franchisor and then other fellow franchisees. Like one of our
Yes.
clients I interviewed, his first client came from another franchisee, and now he has over 1,000 properties under management in Southern California. So the first property came from another franchisee that was kind of at capacity, and I think maybe near retirement age. And he leaned hard on his fellow franchisees as he was scaling the operations.
Hmm. Let's talk success stories and maybe like what people should be worried about. I mean, I know your book is coming out really soon, and I think for me, it's, what's the most challenging case you've handled? Like, what's that case that you're like, gosh, like this was gritty, this was hard, and why? Like, I think I want to know why
Challenging
more than
cases
anything.
like when people don't divulge like personal issues.
Ah,
Yeah, so if they had a criminal blip,
ah,
something like that, then it gets tough. We get tell us last minute, and now we're pretty upfront, and it's in our agreement. They have to disclose all that, and but that makes it tough, in terms of obtaining the visa. And a lot of these things are workable, but if you don't let us know, working with the filing attorney, we can't help you to ensure that you're able to get the E2 visa. But the clients that tend to be difficult are the ones that aren't willing to put in the work, and the failure is much higher if you're not, rolling up your sleeves and willing to allocate a lot of hours for the first, say, 18 months in the business to make sure the culture is set, you get those initial clients, you really start integrating the local business community. The first 18 or even 24 months are really critical, and you should be prepared to work super hard.
yeah. That's, I think that's advice to me too, because I just focused on my podcast fully. I feel like you're saying to me, yo, the first 24 months you need to work super hard to make sure I don't go back to the workplace. Thanks. I want to ask a success story, but I think I'll leave that for the folks. Go read his book. It's all in his book. What I'm more interested in is, post COVID, the world has been in a pretty interesting funk, and all that. And then the new, the election, we had all the immigration stuff going on, and I'm just wondering, does the E2 visa still just kind of scale through all this? There's no bumps along the way with all that's going on, or it's been pretty much ignored, or like what, like where's the E2 visa and all the immigration conversation happening in the States and right now?
So I think it's good to look, especially if you talk about Trump and his second term. He talks a lot. The guy talks a lot. We don't know what's true, what's not true. So I think it's something I'm mindful of, especially with him, to look at their actions. So it's okay. What does he do? He
Yeah.
was hard on some visas. He was hard on the L1 visa. You see him. He's hard on F1 student visas. But all the issues that we're hearing with visas, people being denied entry at the border, there's over 500,000 people in the United States on talent visas and investor visas right now. And I haven't heard a single report in the media of an investor or a talent individual on like an O1 visa, EB1A, EB2NAW, E2 visa being denied entry to the United States or running into issues with USCIS. So that's nearly 500,000 people that he aren't on his target list. And for the first his first administration, the approval rate was pretty steady, and I think ended at like 88% final approval rate for the E2 visa, and pretty similar to some other talent visa categories. So, was it a little easier with Trump for investor visas? Yeah, probably, but like a little easier. Like the approval rate was like 3% different, 91% instead of 88%. So it's not super material for our clients that like we make sure that they're putting the best foot forward and everything's packaged right.
Yeah. I mean, that's good to hear, actually. I mean, and then kind of if someone is denied, you're denied while in that process of applying, is there like an appeal process? Like what happens?
Yeah, good question. So we recently audited our cases going back. I think it was like 8 years. We were founded in 2015, but we went 8 years back, and 87% of our clients received the visa the first time. So they get the visa. Those that don't, the 13% that don't, they have the choice to reapply, which most do, but some don't. They decide not to move to the U.S., or maybe they decide to go through another method to move to the U.S.
Yeah.
But for those that choose to reapply, our final approval rate is 97.5%. So you give us two shots, we're very confident you're going to get the visa, and you can keep applying. I've had one client apply 3 times and he got it the third time. And there were some complications in this case. We were able to work through everything together. But yeah, our goal is to just get it once. Go in, you get the E2 visa, you're on your way.
Yeah.
We don't want you to go through the stress of having to reapply a second time.
Yeah. I mean, aside from what you mentioned earlier on about the fact that people don't divulge everything and then it just gets all murky when you get in the process. Are there like other when you say complications, like what's one top one you see for those folks who don't get through the first time? Like what's that thing that
Trying to keep it just simple, like, ideally the funds come from money that you earned, or it's really clear that you got an inheritance or you got a gift from your parents and it's really well documented. If it's like a loan set up from someone and then they could question the relationship with that person. So the source of funds, ideally it's like very clear, and then it's just like a simple business. And it's not something like, in cannabis or some industry that the U.S. Doesn't necessarily want to be promoting, at the federal level, even though
oh,
in
interesting.
Colorado it's fine. So I would just be mindful for that. If you're applying for a business that's helping seniors, you're going to be hiring 50 plus Americans over the next 5 years. You're going to have an easier time than maybe a fast food business that just serves unhealthy food and loaded with sugar and is targeting kids.
You know what I always find interesting about policy? I was saying to someone on Saturday, I think no. So I had a recording on Friday and Saturday, this last Friday, and I said the same thing to both people. I said you can't out entrepreneur policy. And what I always find interesting when I have these conversations or talk or read and stuff is how there are things you hear the government say, and then there are things you hear them do. And I think it's what they do. Like you said, it's what they do that you always watch. Like it's like, so you say, oh, we're regulating cannabis. Okay, but then you're probably going to work by cannabis business. You're not going to get the visa because it's like, oh, we're regulating it. But no, it's not the thing that is our priority as a country. That's the thing. And it's so interesting because you can get caught up in what they're saying and think that that's what is happening, But it's like, no, watch what they do, watch where the visas go to if you're an immigrant, and you're like, okay, that's the thing I should invest in as, as an immigrant. It's always interesting to me, always whenever I see that.
Yeah, and I think the things that are taboo, it's better to just maybe not do. Not wait till you have like a green card to if you're whether it's online gaming, casino business, or whatever. Maybe it's better just to wait until you're already a permanent resident or a
Yeah,
citizenship to operate that type of business.
yeah. I think the last question I have for you is, and this has been so good, is we didn't talk about this, but like you're allowed to bring family members, right?
Yes, so if you have the same nationality, you can bring them as an essential employee. So say your podcast business blows up, you create a media empire, you can bring people if you already have a Canadian citizenship that act as essential employees at your company. And then there's other visa categories like for Canadians, the TN. There's all different types of visas that you could look at to bring family members or friends that you know. If it's an E2 visa country, there's about 80 of them. The process is a little straightforward, as well as the E1 visa, where if you're doing trade, providing services, physical products, we did a video with an Israeli entrepreneur that has brought many Israelis over to South Florida on the E1 because they're doing trade between the two countries. So those employees are coming over to continue fostering the trade.
Hmm. This is something to think about. I mean, it's a lot of my Canadian friends are moving to the States. I'm not ready yet, but
Why aren't you ready?
I
Okay.
don't know, man. I love this country. I
Yeah.
love Canada, honestly. I do. I do. The US is very attractive, but I do love Canada a ton. But maybe someday
I
I
think it's
might
just,
change my
yeah.
mind.
There's I've lived in different countries, Brazil, France, U.S., and I think it's just time of your life, and maybe
Yeah.
maybe where you are is the right place, or maybe
Yeah.
if you're raising a family, then you give them the family experience in the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. or back home for you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's no one size fits all. The U.S. is
Exactly.
definitely not the best country for everyone, especially where they are at in their life.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Patrick. This has been, I
So
love
thanks,
this,
man.
honestly. I can't wait to share this with the world, honestly. Thank you so much.